are live. This light is way too bright. I'm going to fix that in a second. But Russ has something he wants to talk to you about.
So the second episode of Hard Knocks dropped yesterday, and here is what my basic takeaway is. The NFL wants you to see what they want you to see. There's a lot more editing now that goes on in Hard Knocks than I think we, the fans and the hardened fans, would really like. All that said, still pretty entertaining. The worst part, I think, is if you're a Raiders fan, you don't really worry about how the players look. You don't really worry. And by the way, the year that the Jets were on the Hard Knocks, I didn't even watch it because I knew their coach would play up to it, and I didn't want to.
Wasn't that the Rex Ryan toe sucking?
Yeah, I didn't want any part of that. So I
don't know what you're talking about, but I'm just going to leave it there.
3 minutes in, we have a toe sucking reference. There we go.
Yeah, that's a record.
Well, no, Rex Ryan outed himself as a foot fetishist. He was talking. Yeah. He was talking to his wife, and they.
I mean, who isn't a foot fetishist? Come on now.
Yeah,
really.
And I think
when all is said and done, I'm just kidding.
Didn't they cut Danny Amendola that when he was trying out on that show?
I'm not sure.
I think so. And of course, he's gone on to great things. But getting back to this, a million F-bombs later that John Gruden dropped, he is like really too much of a hot and cold kind of coach for today's player. Like in his meetings, he's ripping them all. Right. And on the sideline, he's ripping them all. And then he brings them on the side later and says, hey, this was good. This was good. I know I'm a jerk sometimes. And it's just, I think he just sends mixed messages to today's players. And the Antonio Brown stuff, like they showed his feet, they really underplayed it. And for 2 episodes going, you have no idea the Raiders are going to Las Vegas next year. That's the biggest thing that they're hiding from all of them.
The NFL wants to,
really?
Come on. The NFL wants nothing mentioned with regards to that.
But I mean, if it's a real training camp, it's being talked about by players and otherwise, and none of it has gotten picked up, remarkably.
You were going to say remarkably. Okay.
Right. Well, I mean, first of all, anyone who thinks that these things aren't constantly edited and that, this was the best thing, like I've said before. Can you hear me? Yes.
Yeah.
Sorry. All right. I'm sorry. I was amazed at your lack of reaction to my incredible insight. All right. No, but anyone who doesn't think these things aren't edited is just like, I've always said the very first, 24/7 or whatever you want to call it that HBO did where, before the stuff they filmed before it hit the air was awesome.
Yeah.
Then the second it hit the air, the second players and coaches and all that got a whiff of what was going to be shown, like the kind of stuff that they like, the kind of stuff they were going to go for. Everything changes, right? So you can't that's like it's just human nature, right? And there's no question that I mean, if you watch the Boudreaux stuff on that first 24/7 before that actually here, that was like some of the best inside sports things ever.
Oh, it was amazing.
But it changed. It changed, and forever it changed. Because now. And this show, which I've never seen Hard Knocks, but I'm sure it's the same kind of thing. And I know if anything, the NFL even like monitors the message they're sending closer than the NHL does. And the NHL is pretty damn close about monitoring their message that they put out there. So yeah, this has to be edited.
Yeah, I would think that the editing got worse, got more stringent as it went along. But if that was the case, then the Randy Carlisle toast thing would have never gotten through. The toaster, the whole toaster thing. That would have been.
Well, there's still. I mean, there doesn't mean that there's not going to be still instances where they catch stuff on camera or they have a camera in the room. Maybe they didn't know about it. It's possible.
Remember the network, which back in the day was HBO, which is the same one that does Hard Knocks, would certainly fight to keep that in and fight the league, I'm sure, on a lot of these shows to keep certain stuff in because it behooves their viewership. So I'm sure there is struggles that go on behind the scenes.
Oh, there's tons of. I've talked to people who've worked on 24/7 when it was with HBO, and then it moved to where it moved to now or whatever. It moved around.
I don't know stuff.
FX, I think it was on for a while, right? Then the NHL Network.
Outdoor Life Network.
Yeah. I mean, I've talked to people who've been involved in it, and they've told me there have been constant struggles. And of course, that is what you're doing, right? Because we all 4 of us have been in press boxes, have been around the situation before. We know what's happening. We know that what's going on here is that there is an absolute line you always tread because, we have freedom of speech and freedom of press in this country, but we don't have freedom of access. So at any point in time, anyone can take that away from us. So as you're in there, it's a battle. Like, and that's what 24/7 people, that's what they've had to deal with too. You know, like, if they put out stuff that makes the NHL look really bad, then the NHL is going to just shut the whole thing down. So there's a line, you know, they have to face that line. And
I want to say I was railing behind Kevin Hayes today, and I took a picture of his car. I just want to let you know that
is Kevin Hayes' car.
Yeah, that's what he's spending the Flyers money on. No, it's not Kevin Hayes' car.
That could be. I don't know.
Well, it's not Ryan O'Reilly's car because it's not through the wall of a Tim Hortons.
Ooh.
That one will get edited out by the NHL.
There you go.
Yeah, if we were on NHL Network, which we're not.
Yeah. No,
you already have you've been fired text already, Mike.
Yeah, right.
I'm waiting for that at 2:01 for Mac.
Well, you know, I mean, you have to be careful. I mean, I've been in situations like I'm sure Anthony has too, different, you know, and Russ writing Sportsology, where you have writers who are writing for you, you know, and you're in that spot where you have people working, and then they submit something to you that you know is going to really it's going to mess people up, and they're going to be angry about it, and you have to sit there and you have to look at it and you have to say, okay, that is something that, you know, is the first thing has to be, of course, is everything completely accurate,
right? If
you know everything is accurate, and you're a reporter, you have to go with it. That's just what you have to do. And the organization has to know that's what you're doing. But if you're going to go with something controversial, you know, I remember one time 5 sourcing something that Travis Yost wrote while he was with HockeyBuzz, going through 5 different people. And we ended up not putting it on there because it didn't, you know, and he might have been right. It was it was a really frustrating story, because one of those stories that probably was right, but we couldn't get anybody to actually go on the record with it saying it was right.
Yeah.
So
I've had
in that situation, you can't do it. You just can't do it.
The NHL has never tried to change anything I wrote, believe it or not, or have anybody has written on my site, but teams have reached out before.
Yeah, no, the teams. Well, that's how that's their protocol of how they'll do it. You know, I've also had teams call me up, like especially in the early days of bloggers. You know, when I was one of the first bloggers, quote unquote, in there, and other bloggers were coming along that were being credentialed by teams kind of haphazardly in the beginning. And someone wrote something on Jeff Carter, and I had a team call me up about it and say, you know, this is out there. What are we going to do about it? And I'm like, well, you know, you credentialed the guy. And right. I mean, it's you know, there was a kind of just a give and take of like, you know, and we were in a new world, you know, we were in a brave new world. I was like, if you have people that you don't, you know really well, you really should. So I threw a bunch of stuff at them at that time and at the NHL. I was brought into the NHL to actually work on a task force that was like to how to get credentials for bloggers. You know, and it sort of fell apart, of course, because
remember the old blogger box? I think the Islanders were the first.
That was mine, right? And the blogger box is a great story because we had B.D. Gallup at that time and somebody else too. Oh, shoot, I can't remember her name. It's terrible. D. Carl. They were both credentialed by the Islanders, and they were in the press box.
Yeah.
The Islanders contacted me. They're like, "You've got 2 bloggers. We want to create a blogger box. Would HockeyBuzz like to sponsor it?" And I'm like, and of course, immediately went to my head. I was like, well, my bloggers are writers, and they're in the press box. I don't want them in a blogger box where they're like a separate spot where they're just putting bloggers in that to kind of like discredit them and to kind of give them because they said, yeah, the blogger box is going to have like a specific access to certain things and not other things and all this stuff and and we're going to have people submit things. I'm like, it's a cool idea, but I didn't want my professional writers in there with them. And I understood, you know, sure, make something like that, create something that works for a while that you can give people small access to. And if someone proves to be kind of like worthwhile, give them access to that's fine. I think that's cool. But so I spent a lot of money to sponsor that box and kind of set the rules on it. So it was like, you know, I said, we'll sponsor this box for a year, but my writers, who I consider writers, they're considered bloggers, are not going to be in there. They're going to be in the press box where they are now. And that's the kind of stuff you have to fight with. I mean, that was the huge thing.
Well, I can tell you that I know of, in talking to a friend who is in a Canadian market, that a certain Canadian team does that. They have a certain area, a sequestered area for bloggers separate from the press box, and they're given limited access. Now, I don't even know if they can go into the locker room.
And I don't think that that's wrong necessarily. I mean, I understand
depends on what they need to write their article. That's the way I look at it.
I think it depends on their experience. Like, I think that, to me, and I have writers that come into Hockey Buzz. Even though we have some cities that have always credentialed us and some that, have never credentialed us, but some that have always credentialed us, I won't ask for that writer's, unless that writer's been credentialed someplace else. I won't ask for that writer's credential for a year. And I tell writers that. I'm like, I want you to prove to the team that you're legitimate for a year.
Right. That's fair.
And then if you prove that you're legitimate for a year, I'll go to them. And then when I go to the team, they're like, yeah, we appreciate that. Even though we had somebody in that same press box previously.
We've all had that experience. I know for myself, certainly when I first started out, I was fortunate at the beginning because I started out in the AHL covering the Phantoms.
Right.
Right after their first Calder Cup. And it took a while for me to, it takes a while to build up, not rapport per se, but that sort of, they know that you're not,
You're not there to get the free meal and to watch the game for free.
Or as stupid as like ads for autographs or things like that. Like, that's what they worry about.
Right.
Precisely.
They worry about, you hear that kind of stuff, that you're going to dress properly. Like, I always overdress, as you guys know.
All the time. You hear it. It's like, oh, you cover the team. Can you get an autograph for?
Oh, yeah, all the time. I know. Of course not.
Yes.
It's the funniest thing. Yeah, like, I've got a credential. A friend, oh man, could you get me a credential? I'm like, no, I can't. It's not that hard.
I get that all the time. Believe me.
And it's
it's a working. You are in a working capacity. That's
you're there in a working capacity. You've got to prove to the team that it's a legitimate thing. You have to prove to the team that you have readers. I think, to a degree. Although I think that that's changing. But back when, that was something that I put in there. Like, have them prove that they have something that they just start this yesterday. But I said, if someone's been going at it for a year, if you've been blogging for a year on a team, that to me shows that you're committed to it, that you're serious about it. Because so many blogs die in a couple months. Like, so many people put up stuff like, this Philadelphia Flyers slapshot hockey.com or whatever will pop up, and it's like, oh, this is the greatest new thing ever. And it'll die in a couple months because it takes a lot of commitment to get through the summer months. It takes a lot of commitment to get through different situations.
Oh yeah.
And even just writing every day is a huge commitment. So yeah, that's like, that to me is really a tricky spot to be in. And teams, the NHL at this point has left it up to teams completely. Like, they have not got involved, as we well know, in teams deciding, where the NHL credentials to NHL events totally differently. Right. So, and that's always an interesting thing too, because NHL events, which include the outdoor games, All-Star games, Stanley Cup finals, and conference finals are NHL events. And like, when it comes to Philadelphia, I don't know where you were, Anthony, but I'm pretty sure you were with us. We were all thrown into the auxiliary press box in Philadelphia when the Stanley Cup Finals came there against Chicago.
Russ probably was at that.
I was there.
You weren't there yet, right?
I hadn't returned. I had that hiatus between 2007.
Oh, gotcha.
Yeah, I sat right near you guys.
Yes, yeah, right. So we were in the auxiliary press box, which is normal for they put the big. But it's kind of weird when you're in your own press box. Right, like, you're in a place where you go to every night, and now you're shoved into an auxiliary press box. So like, MTV can have your seat or whatever. Right. Like, something you never.
The Weather Channel.
Or the Weather Channel, and that honestly is not exaggerations. We've seen that.
The outdoor game. They're only at the outdoor game.
I don't know about that. It's interesting. It's I know it's kind of inside baseball, but people don't realize there's a whole lot of stuff that goes on with this. And what really comes back to what you were saying, Russ, is that teams do control the story, and you can dig as deep as you can deep. And especially now that they cover themselves too, that's also changed the time I've been doing it, to like the fact that, the Flyers.com exists in a big way. And people who were sitting in the press box yelling at me or hating me because I was a blogger and I worked on the internet, now only work for the team's internets. And it's like,
yeah, just think about that.
To sit that
do you know how hard I have to work to get an exclusive quote when the Flyers send out, like, I don't know, 4 interns in the opposing team's locker room after a game?
Yeah. No, it's crazy.
I have to work quickly to get that done.
Yeah, I've seen it. I know it's crazy, and because there are so many interns working for the Flyers, and there were writers who were so pissed off when the team started covering themselves that have gone to work for the teams.
Yeah, you gotta get over that.
You did get over it, and I always said you should get over it. But journalism is a tricky thing. it's really we'll get started, but there's a whole lot of interesting aspects to it, and sports especially, and anything, I guess, but sports has its own things.
I'm gonna try putting on a light. I don't know. Today the lighting's really bad here because we had a bad storm. Sometimes the light helps, sometimes it doesn't. See, it's like, all right, whatever.
All right, here we go.
Let's go.
All right. Hello, where our date is ours date. Okay. Hello, Hockey World. It is Tuesday.
No,
it's not. Hello, Hockey World. It is Wednesday, August 14th, 2019.
I'm future Pulitzer Prize winner Michael Agello.
I'm Anthony Majoni from Sunrise Philly Magazine.
I'm Russ Cohen from Sportsology, wearing my new jet hat for my new season.
Loser.
And I am Eklund, and you're watching HockeyBuzzcast on HockeyBuzz.com. This is the podcast that comes every Monday through Friday at this time to fill you in on the comings and goings in the hockey world. And I wanted to start today with a trade rumor because we haven't had many of them lately. We've been talking RFAs, and RFAs are really, really not easy to keep exciting. Like I'm doing a feature called your RFA Today update, and that is not easy. So, but I'm finding things every day, little things. There are like 12 RFAs, so there is stuff out there. But this is a trade rumor, and it does actually link into an RFA to a degree, and that is Mike Hoffman, Florida Panthers. Mike Hoffman is apparently on the block as Florida tries to clear space. And yesterday we talked, of course, about the fact that Jake Gardiner has a team that's interested in him, but they need to clear space. So, of course, the logical line drawing here was, okay, yeah, that makes sense. Jake Gardiner would make sense in Florida. That's a good fit for them.
Yeah, just what Florida needs is another defensively challenged defenseman.
Yeah, I think Quenneville would quash that.
Yeah.
You see,
although Jake Gardiner is similar to what Brian Campbell was in Chicago.
Yes, you see, like there's.
Well, it'll be a new JG. It'll be Jason Garrison 2.0. Jake Gardiner.
Potentially.
I can't wait to see Jake Gardiner away from the mess that is Toronto. Okay, that's all. I am not going to judge him until I see him play 35 games on another team.
Pray for the sake of Leaf fans, I pray that Jake Gardiner signs with an Atlantic Division team, because then the Leafs can actually benefit from his defensive incompetence that they've been punished with the last 7 years.
Professionalism. There you have it. Professionalism.
Unlike I saw him playing in Wisconsin, so
he's not that bad. He's bad. I mean, and he's made huge mistakes at huge times. But let's remember. Go ahead, Russ. Sorry.
That's exaggerated about his game. But the one thing I'll say is, in Florida, you're going to go with Matheson and Yandel and Gardner as 3 of your 6.
And Ekblad. I mean, Ekblad
can play defense no matter what.
Yes, he can.
So
yeah,
I worry.
Bite back. Somebody's got to be willing to bite back on the play.
Yeah.
That's a problem. Bob's gonna discover real quick.
Oh yeah.
He's not in Lumbus anymore.
And there are people who
that groin will be tested pretty often.
Let's be real about.
I mean, raise your groin if it's not pulled, as I like to say.
We got to be real about Bob too. Bob, when he's on a new team with new defensemen, he has trouble communicating with them because he's a little bit of a weird goalie. And
it's been a while, Russ. How many years has it been?
I know, but is this not
an antiquity?
No, yeah, but there is a lot. There is something out there that people don't realize, that Columbus, they do play a very solid defensive system. They really do, and they, even though they're losing the players, they're not really losing anything on defense. Assuming I would sign everybody back, they actually might be picking up some on defense. So they are. Yeah, Columbus plays a way that has enabled Bob to do Bob's thing for sure. And Bob's thing is staying back in his net, moving quickly side to side, making really great reaction plays. Not too dissimilar to like a Michael Neuwirth. Okay,
no, but he doesn't like a lot of guys blocking shots in front of him. He doesn't like the certain ways that he wants to get the puck to the defenseman. Those things, when Bob is on a new team, become problematic sometimes.
Yeah, they are, and I know I agree, and those things are definitely problematic. And Bob, is going to have to adjust that. This is if he doesn't like people blocking shots, right? And he was on a Tortorella team, remember? So that's
right in front of him. I mean, they're gonna block shots, obviously.
Yeah, I mean, Tortorella makes everyone block 20 shots a game or whatever it is, like the ridiculousness. But now he's going to be on Florida's going to be a fun team to watch. I have a feeling they're going to be more offensive than people expect. I think some of their young players are coming into their own as far as scoring goes, and you're going to really see. I mean, Huberdeau's season last year is so friggin' underrated.
It was.
what he did last year.
Markov is Markov. He's just
No, he's phenomenal. He's a superstar.
I think Florida's markedly improved. Not only the addition of Bobrovsky, but bringing in Connolly, bringing in Achari. I mean, their forwards are a little deeper. I think a guy like Owen Tippett could make the team if they do trade Hoffman. That might be an indication they think Tippett will step in a top 9 role on the wing. So I think there's you never know what the effect of a Stanley Cup winning head coach like Quenneville is going to have on a team. I'm assuming it's going to be very positive because I'm not as hard on Bugner as other people are, but I think that there was something missing in the experience that Quenneville has in getting the best out of his players. But you also have to remember Quenneville and his reputation. There are players that you think are good fits. And there have been players that that were brought in and provided to him by Stan Bowman that he never gave a fair chance and just didn't like. And you could have some guys like that on this team where you think that Huberdeau or you think that somebody like Trocheck is going to be great and effective. And if Quenneville doesn't like the way that they play, then he's not going to give them the type of ice time. Now, I'm not saying those guys specifically. I'm just using them as an example.
He's a specific guy that just re-signed with Nashville. But if he was still with Florida, like Rocco Grimaldi would be the kind of guy that would drive Quenneville crazy.
Right.
But also remember that Quenneville had, Duncan Keith, and he had Brian Campbell, like you said, and he has players. He's been very good at hiding defensemen.
Sure.
That make mistakes. And he also does realize the quarterbacking aspect of defensemen of that, like if you've got these wingers flying around out there, you've got to find a way to get them the puck quickly, and you need that quarterback to get the puck to the receivers essentially. And that's what Gardner does well, probably better than maybe. I mean, Yandel does it well too, but I like where their defense is going, and you can see how potent of an offensive team they can be when you look at their defense. Honestly,
yeah. But the one thing I'm skeptical about regarding this is, and it makes sense if they're trading Hoffman. Hoffman's making $5.1 million, a little closer to 5.2. And if they're clearing that salary out, then they might be clearing it out for to add somebody in a different area of the team, or even add a younger player who's cheaper. But the thing is that look at them right now. Ekblad, $7.5 million long-term, Yandel 6.3 long-term. They just signed Anton Strawman to a 3-year deal, $5.5 million. Yeah. And Matheson is making almost $5 million, and Pizik is at making 2.7. That's a lot of.
You're right. That is a lot of money.
A lot of money.
Yeah. I mean, there's a ton of money, and a lot of money being spent for the next 4 years. Really. I mean, it's just like essentially their top defense. Ekblad signed till 2024, 25. Matheson signed till 25, 26.
Yeah,
that's crazy.
8-year deal. Yeah.
I don't even want to think about that. Like, my daughter's going to be in graduate school at that point. That freaks me out. Will we be alive? You ever think about that? Will I be alive when this contract ends?
I never think about that.
That's how old I feel like I'm getting now. Anyway.
I'm old and I don't think about that. Come on.
Yeah, I know we're not that old, but still, you have to worry about it. That's why I want to keep the contract shorter in the NHL, because the second go back like 15-year contracts.
Because you can outlive them.
Yeah, because I don't want to outlive a contract. I want to make sure. I want to make sure that I can see the end, because I want to know when this guy's a UFA again. Like Panarin, I want to be able to cover him when he's a UFA again.
I want to outlive Bobby Bonilla's contract, Russ.
Anyway, but yeah, that is a lot of money. That is a lot of money to put on defense. But they're not the only team. Okay, they're not the only team interested. But let's talk Hoffman for a second, because Hoffman could be moved regardless of whether or not they are getting Gardner. I've been told Hoffman and two teams talking about Hoffman, who has, like you say, is $5 million contract, $5.5 million contract somewhere in there. One more year, so he's a UFA. So they may know something, because they may have gone to Hoffman. They already at the point where they can. So they may have gone to Hoffman in July or August and said, "Hey, what's it going to take to resign you?" And Hoffman might have said it's going to take this much, and they might be like,
$7 million,
forget about it.
Right.
So Hoffman, the two teams I've heard are Edmonton, which the Edmonton doesn't have a lot of money either, but I've heard that they really do. That Holland does like Hoffman. I like Hoffman a lot too, actually.
The guy gets 30, 35 goals, 65, 70 goals. And
he does it. He's just solid. He's just like a solid type of TJ Oshie-ish type player to me. Like that's, and the Flyers are other team, which I had to bring. That's why I had to bring it up now. So Edmonton and the Flyers, and I was, a little bit surprised when I heard the Flyers name mentioned, because obviously they're in the middle of still trying to sign guys, and they still have to make these deals. But if someone in Philly likes Mike Hoffman, I mean, it could be Vino saying, "Listen, like Mike Hoffman's he's the kind of, and he fits with anybody. He's a good player, but what are your thoughts, Anthony? How would he fit into Philly?"
They'd be determining how exactly they're going to slot things. Philadelphia's main roster spot that they're looking at right now would appear to be third line right wing. That's the one spot that's open. That's the one spot that everybody's indicated that, at least so far, that the Flyers would be comfortable having one of their young players challenging for that third line role, probably alongside Nolan Patrick and either one of Oscar Lindblom or James Van Riemsdyk, depending on the circumstance of the situation. It's just at the moment, I in terms of putting Hoffman in, would he be a natural fit, say, on the right side of Sean Couturier and Claude Giroux? Yeah, it would be a lot of offensive capability there.
Yeah.
But again, the salary match has to be correct at the moment. What is Hoffman's current contract hit?
It's 5.5, so it's like
5.187 for
5.18.
Because again, you're still trying to figure out Provorov. You're still trying to figure out Konechny in that mix there, and you're getting perilously close. You're getting perilously close to the cap, or probably over it in that circumstance. You're going to have to, make a salary. You're going to have to make a salary for salary move there. And
you got to move somebody to get him. You're going to have to make a trade to get them.
And Florida's going to look at it and say, hey, we need a part that's going to be coming back that's going to be useful to us, probably on defense. That's probably where a lot of this is coming from, where everybody looks and says, hey, Philly's got 8 defense, 7 current with Provorov in the offing it as number 8. Well, Florida won't want to Philadelphia's defenseman in this circumstance. That's the other area where if they are looking, let's say, if they could figure out Provorov's contract, could you look at a Shane Gostisbehere potentially going? Because then salary-wise, things match up a little bit better there.
And he
would probably very much welcome going to the Florida Panthers.
Right.
His team he grew up with as a kid. Right. That would seem to be probably the most likely route if that's the way Philadelphia wants to go.
Yeah, Gostisbehere's name is of course going to fly up into this thing.
I'll tell you what I think's going on. What I think's going on is the Flyers want to appear to be interested in a player, the same kind of player who plays the same position as Travis Konechny, who hasn't signed his contract.
Yeah.
Apply pressure because if you
that's a great point.
If Hoffman's making 5.1 and Konechny gets 4.25, at some point, if the Flyers get annoyed, pivoting to Hoffman is not a downgrade at all.
No. Right. And whenever I
I'm sorry.
Whenever I get a rumor, I think along those lines, very, as you know, Russ, like it's like my immediate thing is, okay, the person who's telling me this, what is their motivation to tell me this? Like, so and I thought about that Konechny immediately. Like, I'm like, and if this was coming from a Philly source, I probably wouldn't even write it because of that. Like, I would be like, okay, that sounds too much like, but this is not coming from a Philly source. So for what it's worth.
No, but it's still a backup plan of the team. Like it
could be a backup plan. Exactly.
Butler has to have a backup plan. If he doesn't have Konechny and Provorov to start the season, whatever he did in the offseason isn't going to be enough to make this team look better on opening night. And that's what's important right now to the Flyers and to their GM. So Hoffman is probably their plan B because they're not going to wait forever for Travis Konechny. They're just not.
Well, I think the motivation from Edmonton is pretty clear because if you look right now, I mean, obviously, either McDavid and Draisaitl 1-2 at center or McDavid and Nugent Hopkins, and they move one of either Nugent Hopkins or Draisaitl to the wing to play him in the top 6. After that, their number 1 winger is Alex Chason. Or James Neal. I mean, their wings are pathetic. And if they don't promote Kaylor Yamamoto, which they might not, depending on whether he's ready or not, their wings neutralize the greatness that they have up the middle. That's why that team is so bad right now. And but the thing is, Hoffman's he's not a long-term solution because he's got only 1 year left in the contract. And Florida's not giving him away. They're going to expect something in return. And I don't know what, like, unless you're talking a Puljujarvi or unless you're talking, and which might make a little bit of sense, Russ, because Barkov is there. You got some Finns there. Maybe that would be a good jump start for him. And you have a guy under control for 3 or 4 years as opposed to something. But I don't know. Like, other than that, I don't know what Edmonton would give for Hoffman.
I think just to jump in with this from Philadelphia's perspective, again, with Hoffman having an expired contract, that would be an interesting scenario for Philadelphia as they continue to try to, if they're looking for long-term space, and giving Hoffman a try to see how he would fit in first, second, or third line right wing, depending on where it would go. Plus, you're clearing out an additional 4-2. You're clearing out the 4-2-5 from Shane. In this case, would probably to me would have to be Shane Gostisbehere because he's the one who right now appears to be on the outside looking in terms of top 4 minutes. And in Florida, he would certainly be getting that. So in that scenario, that's where I would think Philadelphia would probably go.
Are the players really going to trade Gostisbehere before they have Provorov locked up?
No, that's the thing. I think they have to know they've got Provorov under. I think they have to be getting closer with Provorov before they would make that move. That's the reason why they're holding 8 defensemen right now in preparation for the season. And they're going to be a relatively cost-controlled option here with one of those young players playing in a third-line role.
I think they'll be holding 8 defensemen well into September. That's the problem.
They might, again, depending on how long this contract negotiation goes, and it's been protracted enough to begin with.
To go along those lines, because Russ found out before the show, or I found out on Reddit as well, that the Bruins signed Alex Petrovic to a PTO, and they have Brandon Carlo and they have McAvoy who are still unsigned. I think you're going to see some of these teams out there making sure that they have at least somebody with NHL experience backing them up in case these players decide to hold out longer. And I think this is a safety net that that the Bruins don't want to have to rely on Stephen Kampfer and Connor Clifton at the beginning of the season, even though they relied on them at points during the playoffs. That's a little different. You're talking about a guy who's a top pairing guy in McAvoy and a second pairing guy in Carlo, and if they play hardball and the Bruins can't get him under contract through the preseason and into the regular season, then adding in a veteran guy like Petrovic and signing him to a 1-year deal is a bit of a stopgap, but it's better than the other side of that equation.
I do want to add one other thing too. So on the Flyers, and having covered Alain Vigneault a lot, he doesn't care about players who aren't there. He is one of those classic coaches like Tortorella, like, hey, whoever's there, that's who I'm playing. That's who I'm utilizing. Alain Vigneault is not going to talk about players that haven't signed like Konechny and Provorov. He is just going to move on. Like that's what he's going to do as a new coach. He's not going to be like, yeah, we're saving a spot for him, so we're doing this temporarily. He can't do that. This is his first year with the team. That's what also further complicates this for a team like Philly.
Do you think Torts is going to care that Zach Werenski isn't in camp after he's lost Panarin and Dzingel and Duchesne and everybody else?
He will, but he won't like he does. No.
Yeah, there's no question. No, he's going to care. Absolutely.
But he won't talk about it. Like he won't.
No, he won't talk about it. But I think that, I think it's going to be a really interesting year for him in general. Tortorella, that's like another story altogether. But he's going to have to show something this year. I mean, obviously last year winning that one playoff round gets you something, but the pressure is on. The pressure's on Kukalainen, everybody
on him when they have no players. Like they're very down. Like they have to have a lot go right with their younger players for this season to do something.
Well, let me say it like this: I agree with you what you're saying, right? So the pressure's not on him, so to speak, like a normal pressure. But when the pressure is on Tortorella because there's not players there, Tortorella tends to go a little bit wackier. And if that pressure continues to mount because there's not players there and he's not getting what he wants and they're not making the right trades, he can go off the rails. And that's what we've seen.
I mean, as long as Jonas Korpisalo is not John Graham too, I think he's okay. If it becomes a situation like it did with John Graham and not knowing who he's going to put in net, then it would be bad. But he hasn't had that in a long time. Like that hasn't cropped up in a very long time.
Yeah. That's true. That's true. I want to see how he deals with, because there's a passive aggressive and then there's just a flat out aggressive element to him. you have both. There's both. I mean, but the passive aggressive one, I don't think gets reported on as much, and the players feel that more than. I mean, the aggressive thing you'll see in the press conferences. The passive aggressive stuff, players will talk to you about. Like they will say, off the record, they'll be like, yeah, he's a little bit, and he does a lot of stuff, and that frustration tends to build from not having the horses to do what he wants to do.
I think what's going to happen with Tortorella and Columbus is this plays into you have to play it my way because we don't have enough here to get through the season offensively. So you're going to have to play this my way, and I think they're going to have to play it really close to the vest this year, and that is sports hockey. So.
Yeah. A couple little things. And something just came in. So sorry, I was out there for a second. I was texting back and forth with somebody. I wrote today about Patrick Laine being, that Montreal was still talking to them, that hasn't gone away, but that other teams are also talking to Winnipeg about Laine. And yet I hadn't been able to find any particular team. Like I was just told teams, and 2 or 3 people said, yeah, they're talking to other teams. No one would give me anything as to who they were talking to exactly until now. So a good friend of ours, actually, they're familiar with the situation, tells me that the Islanders are one of those teams talking trade for Patrick Laine, and that they feel pretty. I mean, we know the Islanders have been digging around about offer sheets, right? With different teams, different players, and we know that they're looking at. And obviously, they had a bunch of money there. They were ready to spend on Panarin that they didn't spend. That they didn't, and the Anders Lee money apparently was figured out before the whole thing. So this money is more. So the Islanders, what would be involved in that trade, and Leddy, I think, would have to be a part of that. That's what my source said too. Leddy would be a part of that.
I think Leddy would definitely be a part of it. It would probably
honestly, I think it would have to be somebody younger. I think it would have to be somebody. Like
I think both, though. I think because the Jets
Thompson for anybody. Like Lou loves them. They're not giving them up, even for a Laine. So
yeah, but the Jets want to win now too. The Jets are very much feel like their window is open.
I think Leddy does make sense because then they could move Dobson in right away, even if he's not 100% ready as a pro.
They're going Pulak there possibly because they may look at Winnipeg may look at him and say
they have a guy
already. Salary wise, cost control, all that good stuff.
I don't think they would go Pulak, Anthony, only because he's too much like Bufflin, where at least Leddy's still a really good skater and different. Well, those two guys.
Well, the thing is that Pulak is arbitration eligible after this year. He's making $2 million. He put up good numbers last year, and you're basically putting yourself in another situation like Trouba, where the guy's the amount of his contract is going to skyrocket. You have no guarantees that he's going to want to lock himself up long term to Winnipeg. So that's why I would say, Leddy's under contract for 2 more years at $5.5 million. And if you go for if they insist on a guy like Dobson, he's on ELC for 3 years. So that's going to be a factor for Winnipeg.
Yeah,
that would be a scenario of like maybe Brock Nelson, Leddy, and a high-ranking prospect that Lou's willing to give up, and I don't even think he would give up Wallstrom. But I think
Villiers.
No, I don't think he'd give up anybody else off the roster. I think it would have to be somebody.
I was going to say, Villiers that would be a big chunk.
Well, I don't think Winnipeg could do that deal because you're talking about $11.5 million in salary there.
Well, it's almost what Laine will make though.
They have a lot of money under the cap.
The Islanders could eat some of that money.
Remember, they've got close to $18 million, right?
Yeah, I think they can do that, Mike. And so I think now again, the other prospect would be interesting because I don't think they would give him Wallstrom at that point because they would already be giving him 2 roster players. But somebody just under that. I think. What
about Mark Peterson in our chat room brings up Bellows and Ho-Sang? Those are two.
They would definitely do. I don't think Winnipeg would want them. Bellows is possible. Yeah.
Bellows has seemed to fallen out of favor lately, right? Like
I think
the buzz isn't as hot as it used to be on Bellows, but I'm not going to say that it's fallen.
He didn't have a good year in the American Hockey League,
right? I think this was his year of adapting to this level, and I wouldn't say that they've cooled on him. I would say this year, if the pattern remains. Right. Then you might hear more of that.
Yeah, I agree. He had to work on his skating, and I think Bellows will be fine. But I think that is the kind of player Winnipeg would look for. I do.
Yeah. That's interesting. Ho-Sang's name comes up too, and I was following a rumor earlier this morning that Montreal had interest in Ho-Sang, which just made tons of sense to me. Montreal
makes more sense,
doesn't it? Like Ho-Sang and Montreal, doesn't that just seem like a perfect fit in some ways?
Yeah, just like Mike Ribeiro in Montreal made a lot of sense too.
There's something about like the Canadians and the way they play and the way their fan base is and everything that they would love Ho-Sang there. They would adore him.
Yeah, they like those undisciplined. No, never mind.
No, but here's what the thing is, though, Mike. Canadian fans will always welcome you, even if you're a little arrogant, if you could back it up with your play.
If you've got skill and like flashy skill,
yeah, they don't care about the rest.
then you're a Canadian. Like I mean, and the best, obviously the best example ever is
Alexei
Kovalev, who was as as skilled as could possibly be, but all over the map. And in Montreal was good, but they wanted him so badly to stay there. We, remember the parade they held to try to get him back. And it's just like that. They love their skilled players, which is
mentioned the locker room where Ho-Sang's not quite where Kovalev was like a really good teaching kind of guy.
Yeah, I mean, as he got older, he definitely grew into that for sure. Another rumor too, another possible destination for Gardner is the New Jersey Devils. And the source I've been talking to for a little bit about this, who's been very good. Rarely you find these sources that are, you're not sure about them. And I get a lot of emails, tons of emails, as you can imagine. So, and people wanting me to say, oh, I saw this, this. And I don't report. I always say, like, if you get like one or two things right before anybody else, then I'll start to like take you seriously.
And not all of those emails are complaints about me.
That's fine. That folder is not touched very often. But this particular person was dead on about the PK Subban, and I missed it. And I was one of his funny things, PK Subban in New Jersey, and I was like, okay, and it was a pretty surprising thing. Like, honestly, this person was dead on about PK Subban, about every aspect of it, about 12 hours before it happened. But I'd never really heard of him before. So I'm like, I can't just throw, whatever. I have to know somebody or meet somebody, or like they have to prove it to me and this guy is now proving it to me in Subban. And then he was dead on Gusev, which again, I didn't go with, because again, I was like, oh, maybe he just got lucky. But then now same source. Okay. Telling me that they're in on Gardner, which and I wrote that they're in on Gardner, but it got a little bit further into how they would do it, which is, that they would like to move Sammy Vatanen to make it work,
right? Which might make sense because Vatanen sees the price of all the defensemen that are going free agent. He's in his mid 20s, and if he wants, say, $7 million a year, they may think he's worth that, and they can maybe get Gardner because Gardner's hanging out there in the middle of August still unsigned. If they can get him on an amount that they think is reasonable for a 2 or 3 year deal, then they could keep Vatanen until the trade deadline, then rent him and probably get a good return for him and improve their chances of being competitive in the Metro. But I don't know. I mean, they're way under the cap right now, so they don't need to wait to trade Vatanen.
Well, no, the issue is this guy goes on to say, that it says that Ray's comfortable doing this. Ray Shiro feels confident in being able to lock up Hall long term as well as paying Nico, and obviously, right.
He's comfortable, but
Hall, they do have a lot of money coming up. Like, they need to keep space. They can't. And they can go short term, they could go short term without affecting things. But if Gardner wants, like, say, more than 3 years, they can't do that. So they have to be able to, unless they can move like that and make something happen.
Well, because they know in 3 years they're going to have to pay Jack Hughes.
Exactly. So that's the big question right there. So, and don't think that the PK Subban trade, they didn't factor in the Jack Hughes element as well, because PK Subban's deal, which is $9 million, and they took on the full $9 million, that's over within 3 years, which means if Hughes is a star, which a lot of people think he will be, they're going to need to carve out at least $8 or $9 million a year, and maybe potentially more if he's a superstar, to pay him on a long-term deal.
I don't think spend the money on Gardner right now. I don't. I think they've made enough moves where it's already going to be, look, they're better than they were last year. Like, no matter what, say what you want about the Devils, they will improve. But it's a lot of different new moving parts, young players, different players. How much are you going to really put on John Hines' plate? I think they're going to look at that too.
It's the thing is, Zach, it's getting to the point. I mean, we're at August 14th right now. We're about a month away from the beginning of training camp. It's getting to the point now with a guy like Gardner, who everybody thought was going to be signed by now, that he and his representatives are going to have to be open to a 1-year deal.
Unless, and I agree with you, there's two scenarios we've seen with this, and it's like I forget the defenseman that used to do this.
Cody Franzen was.
Thank you. Cody Franzen was the perfect. There's two things that could be happening here. One, Gardner knows he has a deal in place, but like a team has to do things first, which is why he's sitting back and not doing anything. That feels likely to me. The other is that they just have overplayed their hand, but I don't think that that's the case. I think it feels more likely that at least in their head, they have a pretty confident feeling that somebody's going to sign them for a deal that they like, but they're giving that team a chance to work it out. That's what it feels like is happening more than anything else, because I don't feel like they've overplayed their hand, because if they overplayed their hand, they would go back to Toronto probably, and Toronto would have done something with them.
Well, I mean, because Toronto's up against the wall, I think that they would have to trade Cody Ceci if they wanted to bring Gardner in. I don't think they're going to do that. So there's really no space for them to do that. I still think the Leafs are going to go out and probably add and maybe bring in a guy on a PTO like a Girardi or a Phaneuf or a Ben Lovejoy, one of these guys out there, because none of them have been signed and they may be desperate enough to take a PTO.
Bring Lovejoy on that team. That'd be interesting.
Now,
I got one thing I want to talk about before we get to some questions here.
Oh, okay.
I'm sorry. that was a sneak. And it was brought up in the chat room, and Russ, I know you probably know about this more. The Rangers season ticket thing that's going on, which I thought was interesting. And I know this happens with some teams, but just wanted everybody's opinion on it. The Rangers are charging more for certain games than others.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Yeah, they're doing that.
Variable pricing. They're doing it
right. Other teams have done this as well.
Yeah.
Maybe we should leave this for another day as a topic, because it's an interesting topic, but I do want to touch base on it. Maybe we touch base on it tomorrow or something, but I think it is a fascinating concept to debate. I don't necessarily think they're wrong, but I think we should get to it.
I think we can talk about that going forward. I probably could do a whole show on it, but I'll just say this. It's not just hockey anymore.
I know.
The Toronto Blue Jays are doing it for baseball. They charged over like $60, $65 for bleacher seats for the Yankees game. And for the games against Texas this week, I think they're about half the price. So it's bled into other sports. But I we definitely would talk about it.
Yeah, the Mets have done it for years too.
We'll talk about it more, but I think it is an interesting one. All right, so let's take some questions now from the chat room. By the way, if you want to, the chat room is found on YouTube. And you can find it right there. Enjoy it. We always have a lot of people in there. It's fun.
Okay. I'll just pop this one from Esmir up here. Do you think that the Islanders' Sebastian Aho, that's the defenseman, could be involved in a possible trade for Laine?
That's the alternate universe Sebastian Aho?
Russ, the thing is, I mean, he's a decent prospect, but he's not a guy who I think is considered like a future top four. He's maybe a bottom pairing guy at best.
I think he's a 5. I think he could start on the Islanders this year. I think there's a good chance of that. He had about 40-something points in Bridgeport this year. He does bring a lot of offense, but I do think they would be looking more for Letty than him.
Yeah. Terry GG&G asking Marner 2-year deal, which was talking about in his blogs. What is the AAV? Over 7 or under 7 each year? It's over 7.
Over 7. It's not
much though.
But I'll tell you right now, I would be shocked if it's, Anthony, you've said this before, with a 2-year deal, you're running into, with the potential of a lockout, it being a 1-year deal. If there's a lockout the following year, that's why I think at minimum, it'll be a 3-year deal. I can't see them going 2.
Yeah. Anthony's got to sit up taller when we do the questions. I've noticed that.
Hello there, Black Bar.
Yeah, I agree. I gotta be 3
soon.
Anything else there? Got okay.
Johnny Red, who do you guys think the Rangers will trade this year with $6 million going back on the cap next season? I'm not sure what he means about $6 million going.
Because they're going to have dead cap space next year.
I honestly think that Kreider is a possibility.
If Kreider plays out this year with the Rangers and they trade him at the deadline, then it's Kreider. Would they trade Mark Stahl? Could they find someone to trade him if they trade him with a good prospect? Maybe. So then that would clear out the money. I think those are the 2 likely candidates right now, right off the bat.
I think I would try to get Mark. If I was Minnesota, I would try to get Mark Stahl out there.
Yeah.
I would. I would try to put them together. I would try to get him with Eric. I think it would be good to see that situation.
He had a good year last year. He had a bounce back year. I think the tough thing for Mark Stahl is when you have that eye injury like he had, he was never going to be the same Mark Stahl again. But he's still a really good defenseman. He's played a lot of games for the Rangers. So I think at some point they're going to move on from him.
Yeah, he is. I agree with that.
Okay, Funky Cold Zadina says, Russ, you're a prospect guy. Where do you see Michael Rasmussen's game for this season?
This is a tough one because I've heard through the grapevine Steve Yzerman doesn't love him. And I think Rasmussen has to really prove himself. He's got great hands. If you put him on the power play, he will score some points. He should be able to get 20 goals. But if they don't like what they see out of him in preseason and they give him a reduced role, you might be looking at 14 goals.
Okay.
Goalie FP, which is Frank and our buddy. Oh, wait, no, that's the wrong one. Of course, the chat moves, so sometimes
I want to say this since you put it up. Anytime Thomas says it's a minor trade, it's really minor. When he says it's a major trade, it's a minor trade.
It's the Wings and the Flyers. I'm waiting on it. We're waiting on it. They've got drumroll here. Thomas is put in the chat room. Will Mark Stahl and someone else for Zucker? I want to throw this out about Zucker. Now that Fenton is gone, Zucker is going nowhere. I was told that all the Zucker stuff had to do with Fenton, and that was one of the actual issues that Craig Leopold had. Yeah, he doesn't want Zucker going anywhere.
Zucker's a 30-goal scorer. You don't trade those guys away. And supposedly, there was a lot of talk about them making a trade with Calgary for Zucker at the deadline. The guy who was coming back was Michael Furlik. That's not a good deal if they were
trying to say.
Here's the trade. So Russ will be interested in. The Tampa Bay Lightning have acquired a 2020 fourth-round pick from the Detroit Red Wings in exchange for Adam Ernie.
Oh wow!
Oh man,
has brought in Adam Ernie back. One of his original.
There's how smart Yzerman is. That's
Adam Ernie will be a top 9 forward on the Red Wings.
He will be.
I completely agree with that.
He could score 20 goals for them. He's got sandpaper in his game. This is a really smart pickup for them.
We were in the press box. I know why you're saying this, Anthony, because I was in the press box when Ernie was moved out of the Flyers situation, and man, Russ was not happy. Russ was like, "What a stupid!" Not happy, but just was vehement about the fact that the Flyers letting Ernie go was a bad thing.
No, they never had Ernie, but they may have been on a discussion.
But didn't they have? Wait, who am I thinking of? No, what am I thinking? I'm sorry. I know we talked about this.
No, maybe there was trade talks about him because Ernie's never gotten.
Oh yeah, I think the Flyers were also in on him. That's what it was, and you were thinking.
But here is the issue with Tampa Bay. I'll just read them off. Now, Nolan Foote was a first-round pick this year, so it's going to take him a few years. Alexander Volkov, Taylor Radish, Boris Kachuk, Mitchell Stevens. They are loaded with forwards. Yeah. They're loaded with forwards.
I want to say something about Nolan Foote too, because during pre-draft, he gave me the exclusive, and I brought it up on this show and told other outlets that he played with a broken bone in his hand for most of that season, and he still scored 37 goals. He had healed over the summer. We got to see him in the World Junior Summer Showcase, and you could see an appreciable difference in what he's able to do with his shot now. So I think you're going to see a big year out of him.
And the other factor with Ernie is he was still a restricted free agent.
He's still a free, which is a big factor because the Braden Point stuff is the two guys they haven't signed yet were Braden Point and Ernie, so they have to.
I would be shocked if Detroit doesn't have Ernie signed within 2 or 3 days.
Okay, but let's talk about for 2 seconds. Is Julian Brisebois doing a good job? I don't know.
That is a really good question because it's hard to judge so far. I think getting Vasilevsky signed was really huge.
That's a good feather in his cap. I'll give you that.
That was not easy, and that couldn't have been easy.
You could say this. The fact that it was understandable that he didn't make a move at the deadline last year because they were such a great team and playing so well that why mess with success? The deals that he's made so far, he trades JT Miller to open up cap space for Point. He dumps the contract of Ryan Callahan on Ottawa and takes back Mike Condon, so he opens up more cap space. Other than that, he really hasn't done much.
No, and that's my basic point.
He brings in Shattenkirk and he gets Shattenkirk at a bargain.
Well, why would you do much? You had one of the best teams in NHL history
in the regular season. That's why.
Yeah.
You don't.
Yeah, but still, I mean, I gotta go. If your team is that dominant in the regular season, you're not doing much. That's like
you still should do something because something was wrong. That's the point. And if you didn't change the coach, you do have to change something. That's my belief.
Well, and they did. I mean, they're on defense. Strawman's gone. They're not bringing back Girardi. They re-signed Coburn for a lot less, and they brought in Shattenkirk. So they did change something.
But I think they probably needed to do a little more. I think Brisebois in the last 2 years hasn't done much. I don't think Yzerman left him a lot to do with, but I don't think he's being very creative. That's my point.
Right. And
it's only been since May, right? I mean, like
no.
Last September.
Wait, didn't Yzerman announce? Right. As a GM, sorry, I'm thinking when Yzerman took the job.
When he joined Detroit, right? Yeah.
Right. No, that was in May.
No, I think.
One more question, and we'll end it. Esmir asks, "What do you think of the Devils' prospect Michael McLeod? Is his window already closed in New Jersey?"
Well, Michael McLeod's interesting because he's big, he's fast, he has a great shot. His hockey sense isn't great, and his decision-making isn't great. Okay. And that's what holds him back. He's one of the fastest guys when he is on the ice and getting it. If you like zone entries, he is great on zone entries. Then all of a sudden, he still doesn't know exactly what to do with the puck. And that is the problem. It's plaguing him. I want to say he only had 7 goals last year or something.
33 points in 55 games with Binghamton.
Crazy low for a guy with the amount of talent that he has. Yeah. But again, in this league, you have to be a quick decision maker. And unfortunately, if you're not, it's going to show. And I think it's starting to show on him.
Yeah, and he only had 3 assists in 21 games with the Devils. So he was given a long look. And he's going to have to come to camp with having improved something, maybe strength, maybe, his ability to go to the front of the net to make a difference, because there is talent up front with the Devils, and he could get left behind.
I'll give you an example of a guy who didn't make my top 15 list, but has probably leapfrogged McLeod in John Hines' eyes, and that may be Nathan Bastian.
Yeah.
He is a one-dimensional guy. Like, if you put in Nathan Bastian for the whole season for the Devils, you might get 12 goals.
Right.
Now, a little bit sandpaperish, but he still needs to probably be a little meaner. Doesn't skate great.
Right.
So I don't know how many minutes you want to give him to score 12 goals, right? But he'll score more goals right now than Michael McLeod will, and that's scary. But McLeod has more talent.
He might be a better fit on the fourth line than McLeod is. And the funny thing is, they were line mates in Mississauga. So you're putting them side by side. It's surprising because McLeod has more talent, but maybe Bastian has more work ethic.
Right.
If McLeod fixes this, he could still have an impact.
There you go. I like the fact, I'm going to just throw a little thing out there that Yzerman, that Terry G says Tampa already has Big Bird and Oscar in the minors, and Ernie was easy to move. I agree. It's definitely true. As a Muppet fan of myself, I like any Muppet reference that can get thrown out there. Sorry.
I don't know move Ernie, but that's me.
Yeah. No, he's a really good. He's a
You'd have Adam Burton, Adam Ernie.
Yeah. There we go. There we go.
Ernie God.
Beautiful. I think it's all the time every day. Thank you, Anthony, as always, for jumping on board. Someday maybe I'll do your show.
Coming up.
You gotta negotiate. You gotta negotiate with my, my people.
First,
I'll get your people in touch with my people.
We'll do the lunch thing.
We'll have a lunch. We'll talk about it.
The 3 people here.
We'll talk about it over lunch. I don't leave the house for less than $1,000. We know that.
Well, it's our show's 10:30 anyway, so it's more like a midnight snack.
That's true. That's true. No.
$1,000 doesn't even pay your HVAC guy.
I know it doesn't. I know. That's true. Remember, without the buzz, it is just hockey, kids. We will talk to you tomorrow.